Major funding for Frontline is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Additional funding is provided by this station and other public television stations nationwide, and by the Chubb Group of Insurance Companies, for over 100 years providing worldwide business and personal insurance through independent agents and brokers.
It's gotten worse.
I mean, that's incredible. I've never seen anything like it.
Benzene, carbon tetrachloride, trichloroethylene. Frank Taylor's family drinking water could have been bottled as paint remover. This week, on Frontline, the story of one man's fight against toxic wastes in our water.
From the network of public television stations, a presentation of KCTS Seattle, WNET New York, WPBT Miami, WTVS Detroit, and WGBH Boston. This is Frontline with Jessica Savage.
Our story tonight can be called A Story of Our Times, a film in which, by the end of it, you may find the sound of water dripping from a faucet ominous. There are at least 16,000 major uncontrolled toxic waste dumps in America. This map shows the 419 worst ones. They're polluting the water of millions of Americans who live near them, jeopardizing lives, health. This is the story of one man's battle when he discovered his well water was contaminated by a toxic waste dump near his house. Frank Taylor's a house painter. He's from a small community in central New Jersey, and his battle started back in 1975. The film follows him for 5 years as he fights bureaucratic red tape and indifference and even hostility from the agencies and officials designated to protect our water. There's one point to keep in mind. The owner of the waste site in this story refused to be interviewed on film. The film In Our Water was nominated for an Academy Award. It is produced, directed, and reported by Meg Switskapel.
We first moved out here because we wanted a garden free of chemical fertilizers, insecticides, herbicides. We wanted to raise things organically. I planted fruit trees. We set up these fences for chickens, pigs, sheep, and of course the geese, which are really the only remaining livestock I have. When the water problem came up, I just lost interest. And it looks as though we might as well have moved into the middle of a sewer. Well, the morning with the cup of tea, and, you know, I'd been accusing Rita of not rinsing the cups or not washing them clean or changing brands. And I decided that I was going to check the water finally, and I went into the kitchen, poured a glass of water, or ran it out of the tap, and then smelled it immediately. And it had a sharp, acrid odor, which after 5 minutes would dissipate. If you let that same glass of water sit for 5 minutes, there was no discernible odor. But if you poured it, and while it was still fizzing a bit from being poured, catch the odor, it was definitely there. And that's when I called the 4 kids and my wife in, and I said, Nobody drinks this water until we have it checked. You don't brush your teeth with it, you don't cook with it.
I had noticed it prior to Frank. I had noticed an odor when I was doing the dishes and a feel with the water. It was a certain feeling. It had an oily feel. But I thought perhaps it was something, you know, defective in the pipes, or I couldn't explain it, you know, and I thought, well, it'll pass, and it didn't. And then I had noticed when I was showering that I would get very dizzy, and I didn't think it was the water that was doing it. I just thought I was feeling badly myself. And well, there were, you know, many things that were not working right, like if I would do certain type of cooking, things would fall apart. Oh, vegetables would turn color. They would turn black. Noodles would just disintegrate, completely disintegrate if I were cooking noodles.
I don't want you, girl. Over where? Far to you, Frank. You're a big boy now. You make up your own mind. I don't just suspect that we were drinking chemicals a long time before we were aware of the contamination. I know that we were. Our dental record got to be absolutely terrible. Many cavities. A general feeling of debilitation and lethargy. Lisa wound up with unidentifiable rashes. She was in Princeton Hospital in isolation for 3 days. The doctors didn't know what the hell was wrong with her. Now, it's entirely possible. Lisa, being the youngest, being fair-skinned, was more susceptible to rash than the rest of the family. So one certainly has to suspect the landfill. When I first got to know Mr. Jones, he took me on a tour and showed me what a nice, clean, safe operation he was running. Then he pointed over toward Teddy Cordes' property and he said, "You see that house over there? Don't have anything to do with that fella. He's some kind of a nut." Teddy Cordes also has a contaminated well.
We observe in our coffee and tea such a multicolor, rainbow color of water on tap. We have a feeling that we are dirty people. We didn't wash good enough our dishes. And that was, you know, bad feeling. And yet, we try to wash better, same effect. And at this moment, it comes Frank Keller and say how badly his water is. So naturally, we have to answer.
We honestly believe that, you know, Ted was really a strange person before we met him. And we met him, he was one of the sweetest guys around.
I avoided the guy for years because I figured there's enough screwballs in the world without going out of my way to meet one who has been reported as a screwball, you know, already certified by Jones. And I found when I got to know Ted Cordes that he had told Teddy that we're queer people. We raise our own animals and eat them. You know, that's something really nasty. Here, Greg, you want some in? Come on, eat. All right, enough? Yeah, we'll put this on the ground, and you be a nice fella and don't nip me, huh? Look at the blue eyes. Okay, now he'll go over and he'll talk to the rest of them and tell them how he got the best of it. That's his mate. He goes over and he gives her the whole story and then goes on about his business. Let's just follow them out to the landfill. 1975. I called Board of Health, and they sent the man down, and he turned the water on, and he said, wow, there certainly is something in here. 6 weeks later, we got a report back stating that our water was perfectly fit for human consumption. It is potable. After the township told me my water was potable, I couldn't believe it. So I called the state Department of Environmental Protection. 6 weeks later, we got a report back from the DEP saying that the water was fit for human consumption, that it was potable.
I know nothing about sending them a letter regarding its potability. I was involved in the matter as a geologist to render geologic assistance in the matter. And I took the sample, yes.
And you got the result?
Right.
So did you ever tell them not to drink their water?
I don't recall.
Nothing happens. Nothing happens. I called DEP so many times, and the person who answered the phone after I told the story would say, this is outrageous. This can't happen. We're going to do something about this. And I'll call you back tomorrow. Well, tomorrow he didn't call. The day after that he didn't call, and I'd pick up the phone and I'd call again, ask for that same individual, and an entirely different person. No concern, just totally disinterested. The only real help I got was right here, Teddy. He said, Frank, anything I can do to help, even fight.
I have no fear because I always say, if I survive Adolf Hitler and his concentration, we have been working in chemical factories. Now back again, where if somebody was working 3 months with lungs, it's finished. Usually, you know, they die. So I was the one who organized the escape. That's not good. One, second time, third time, fourth time. After fourth time, I succeed. Because I learned how to escape.
At the same time we were trying to determine what was in our water, a local geologist began her own investigation.
We're sitting on Old Bridge Sands, and this is the same formation that the Jones landfill is located on. It's very sandy soil, and you walk on the site and you feel like you're at the beach. The material that is deposited at JIS Company is sitting on top of the sand, and the rainwater that comes down percolates as water would percolate through coffee grounds and moves slowly through this mass of debris and garbage. Chemicals don't stick to these particles. I was down to the DEP in early 1975 to try to persuade them that the JIS landfill should be investigated, and was left to cool my heels in the waiting room while landfill operators walked past.
Sometime after Ann Kruger and I had contacted the DEP and gotten things started, they told Jones that he had to collect samples from the wells around his place and have these analyzed. Knowing that he had no monitoring wells, Jones assumed that the state people wanted him to sample the wells of neighbors. He visited 4 of us and also took a sample from his own utility well on the landfill site. He delivered them to a private laboratory, New Jersey Dairy Lab. The story I got was that Jones refused to pay for the report, therefore never received it. Somehow or other, and I'm not sure quite how, Laszlo Zabel got a hold of that copy.
We requested that we have the results of that. However, you know, looking at the dairy results, we wanted to make sure that the results are accurate.
You know, back then I didn't know that 60 parts per million of selenium was dangerous. I look back at how our dental history went, and I recognize its danger now. But I knew enough to know that, hey, some of these counts are very high. They have to be bad. And Zabel backed it up. He said, yes, these wells are polluted. And I said, have you notified the other people on the list, you know, on the report? And he said, well, no. He said, we can't use this information. We can't notify them because if we use the report, we might have to pay for it. And I was appalled. I took that copy and I went to Siegel and showed them the report and talked to them about it.
Kind of scared me. I gave him a glass of it, and It sort of scared me when he says, I think your water's polluted.
I went to Earl Lewis.
I got a copy, it's upstairs somewhere, from the fellow down the corner here. He gave me a copy of the results of the tests in this area, so I have that.
And I went to Donald Jones and told him about it. I was the one who notified.
I said, Frank, what are we going to do? And he says, I've got to tell these people. He says, I couldn't live with myself if I didn't. And he said, I said something about, you're going to get yourself into a lot of trouble. And he says, I don't give a damn.
And how could I sit here and let these people drink water without at least warning them that it was bad?
Our pure, clean water, it just actually rotted it out. Now, it's made out of lacquer spandex and Antron nylon, all right? I have never bleached them. I've never done anything but wash them with, you know, normal, everyday detergent.
Somebody dumped some kind of chemical, probably sulfuric acid. Whole white houses changed to the black color. Yeah, it was a very big commotion. Our neighbors have been complaining. Nobody did nothing.
There were several DEP officials down, and for a long time they had been sort of, I felt, badgering with me with this sort of thing. Mr. Kaler, are you sure you didn't do anything to pollute your own well? And I said, you know, you've asked me this at least 18 times already. Instead of bothering me, why don't you go down in there and check that truck with white powder spilling off the back? And he said, well, we have our jobs to worry about. Sort of hopeless dejection, I called the EPA labs.
Over 1,000 parts per billion.
What's the state of New Jersey doing about this? What's the state's
Nothing. Not doing anything. This is Frank Kaler's well. They could almost bottle this and use it as cleaning fluid or paint remover. I mean, it's sickeningly funny. It's just carbon tetrachloride, 400 parts per billion. Benzene, which is a known human carcinogen, 230. I've never seen an analysis of drinking water that's that high anywhere. Chloroform, 4,900. This is over 10 times what the highest EPA has ever recorded in any drinking water supply anywhere. Look at the lead levels in this one well. Can you imagine that?
1,000?
Yeah, really incredible levels.
Yeah, it's a horrible set of numbers.
I mean, these people have all requested help. They've been told their wells are condemned, but we can't do anything for you. They've been shut out. No one is willing to come to their aid.
They did everything they could to sweep this thing under the rug. They did everything they could to keep the problem from coming out into the open in public. Let me turn this on and you go out by that old well there.
Fill this up?
Yeah. There it comes.
Oh, my God. Look at that.
Did you get a whiff of it yet?
Yes, sir.
I don't want you to get splashed. It's gotten worse.
I mean, that's incredible. I've never seen anything like it. I've done a lot of work in drinking water in cities like New Orleans and Cincinnati and Philadelphia. Almost everyone describes as some of the worst drinking water in the United States.
Oh,
And what I saw in the laboratory report of this water makes this water about 1,000 times worse than any of those cities. And that's where they're finding high cancer rates associated with drinking water.
Yeah, now I've got 4 kids raised on this water.
Well, you're lucky that you caught it,
Yeah.
that they weren't drinking it for a lifetime.
Well, we don't know how long they were drinking.
Carbon tetrachloride, trichloroethylene, tetrachloroethylene, chloroform, benzene, almost all the chemicals that are in your well. These are all well-established, known cancer-causing chemicals. There's no real dispute within scientific circles about the evidence on that. It's natural to want to know what these chemicals mean to you and to your children and to your husband. And
What about
live
other
here.
illnesses?
There's a study where they They noticed that their laboratory animals were not reproducing properly, and they tested the water, and they found that a number of these types of chemicals were shown to inhibit the reproductive cycles, to show embryonic growth retardation.
I could have phoned them informally and said what we had found, but it was not my business to officially inform these people that this is what we had found in their well, be it bad or good. I'm not saying it wasn't done, I'm just saying it wasn't my official capacity. I had enough to do investigating the geology.
I think the inspectors have gone personally to each one of these people in the area and advising them that maybe some contamination in there, and we will be doing further testing on it, requesting the DEP to do further testing on it, and we will let them know the results as they say.
To date, even now, as far as I know, none of these people have been officially notified that their wells are dangerously contaminated.
No, nobody has ever told us not to drink the water. We're just not going to drink the water.
Legally, morally, ethically, once I knew the water was bad, I couldn't sell this. The only thing I could have done with it was abandon it. And I couldn't afford to do that. And some people, they're not monsters, they're just average neighbors and friends, and they say, why don't you dump it, why don't you dump it? Now, how in the hell can any person do this to somebody else? I couldn't.
When Teddy was negotiating to buy this property, Teddy questioned the hole over there, and they told him that, Teddy, don't worry about it, because that hole is supposed to be filled up. But as time went on, he was only digging further and further and further.
We wrote a petition and circulated it and presented it to the township committee. And one of the major items in that petition was that the area be tested in ever-widening circles to determine exactly how far the pollution existed. And a week later, I got a summons from my township for failing to abate the nuisance of having a bad well.
We said this is a nuisance, and according to the public health nuisance code, this is considered a nuisance, and also it does not meet the provisions of the housing code, therefore he should not be using the well, and the house is not habitable.
There's no way they would get me to move out of the house. We created so much publicity, raising bloody hell about it, until the township was forced into supplying municipal water here.
The Kaler and Cordes families are hooked up to South Brunswick municipal well water.
You're going to use scaffolding?
Ladders
and honey?
No, we'd use ladders. Throughout this situation, I've run into attitudes from people. What does he know? He's only a painter. And of course, I resent this a little bit. I paid a very high tuition to learn what I know of polluting chemicals. After having gone through 2 years or so of trying to get the township to run water, the municipal water became contaminated from a different source.
The contaminated municipal well was shut down. It was, however, one of 3 wells taking water from the same source. The other 2 wells may become contaminated.
If my well becomes contaminated, and then the municipal supply that replaces my own well becomes contaminated, there's a serious problem. Well, this department's plan is to deal with these situations as we find out about them and try to remedy them as best we can and minimize the damage.
What about preventing them from happening? Drought. Municipal water is restricted, and Teddy is forced to use his contaminated well.
Plants are dying. Now, we give the water with poison, the plants will die anyhow. So it's a good question. Water, not water. Business is going down completely to zero. we are almost finished, practically. Or we have to depend only on the rain, which is very hard, you know that. "90% is dead. Oh, enterprise for nothing. Garbage, and maybe 1 in 100 or something would be good. So naturally, still I save it. But that's not the way to make production. You know what that's mean by it. That's not the way to exist. Whole work, the greenhouse space, energy to heat it, everything for nothing. So naturally, we have to use our brain on what to do. There will be no help from government, from nobody. No, we will start to grow potatoes or anything what will grow with polluted water.
Teddy Cordes and I hired a lawyer and joined suit with the state against the JIS landfill and the companies that dumped there. Hiring that lawyer was probably our first really big mistake.
The damages were no longer that terrible, for one thing. The damages to their life had been completely eliminated, except as it existed in the past, because they now had public water. The damage to the well was no longer an issue because they didn't need the well. They had public water.
What about Teddy's nursery?
Well, but apparently he didn't care to continue on in the business.
I don't think that's true.
Well, that was his version of it.
Mr. Mezzi was beginning to talk in a way that upset me very much. He wanted us to settle. He kept suggesting that we settle. Don't carry it through the court. But as time went on, I got the feeling more and more that Fred was not interested in winning a case for us. He was interested in getting out of the case and getting us out of it.
What do you think, Teddy?
No, absolutely not.
So we verbally agreed to settle for $10,000, but only after offering to settle. Teddy says $5. I seem to remember $1. No, to settle for $1 if the court would close the landfill. And the court refused to close the landfill. They admitted that the landfill did damage the aquifer. It did poison my well. It must have poisoned my children. But maybe 1,000 years from now, it'll drift away a little bit, so no harm was done and we collected nothing. We dreamed that there was justice in American courts, and we got wiped out. You talk about David and Goliath. We were so naive to fight Shell Chemical, Ortho Pharmaceutical, Textron Incorporated, General Motors, General Electric, BASF Wyandotte, Phelps Dodge. And that's a partial list of the people we filed suit against.
The state did not press charges against those industries.
But why not?
It's never been our policy to sue companies that generate waste when they take it to a landfill that's registered for that waste, as long as the landfill itself is functioning.
The state allowed companies to bring the waste there.
I'm not saying the state's at fault. I don't think there is fault, no.
The JIS landfill is still operating. The Department of Environmental Protection is still, ostensibly at least, trying to close it down. The materials that have been deposited in that landfill are still leaching into the groundwaters, and they will be leaching for many years. I've begun to feel that I come here with the realistic thought that these meetings don't really seem to produce any results. If we can make it more expensive to pollute than not to pollute, then industry, which is very well represented here tonight, I count 6 against, what, 3 or 4 at the conference table, will, as a matter of simple self-defense, have to figure its own way out of the dilemma which it has created.
We're for and have spent money and have led the way on a lot of environmental fights. The chemical industry does not object to spending money for sound environmental control. We are objecting to sending good money after bad because we have much better ways to use it.
This is obviously a continuing dialogue. Therefore, I want to tell you that I hope that this is not our last meeting together. I have a telephone number, and I would like for you to write it down if you would. It's 609-292-2885.
No one gets nailed down, and I still say, and I'm going to say this probably to my dying day, we've got to make it more expensive to pollute than not to pollute. And unless we do that, pollution will continue. Absolutely.
Meanwhile, you have my phone number.
You're all right. I wrote it down.
Okay, good. Thank you again.
When I suspected possible radioactive contamination, I called the state and had to push to get them to take samples. After trying to get written results of the radioactive testing done in our area, wasting weeks, I remembered that the state's environmental commissioner, Jerry English, had told me in the spring, call me anytime. I called her office several times, but never managed to reach her. On August 6th of 1980, I went down to Trenton to try to get the written results of the testing.
I'm sorry, sir. Mrs. English isn't in the office today. Is there something I can do to help you? My name is Barbara Ackerman. I'm her executive assistant.
Well, perhaps there is. We came down because we had been promised...
Who is we, sir?
Well, I'm Frank Kaler from South Brunswick, and I'm spokesman for a group of people in South Brunswick and Monroe. Recently, there's been some radioactive testing done on my well and other wells in the area, and we've been promised that we would be supplied with copies of the laboratory analysis sheets and any reports. We've received nothing, so we thought we'd...
First of all, I'm very sorry. If you want to come in and see Mrs. English, what I would suggest, and I would suggest that you always do this if you're coming down to any governmental agency or anywhere, that you call and set up an appointment, because what we try to do is be very responsive.
I understand.
And what, you know, I'm not used to someone coming in
met,
to see the boss and having, you know,
I met
do I
Jerry
stand
English.
and wave and say, hello, folks?
I met Jerry English
Silly.
last spring at...
Please turn that off.
At Governor Burns' Toxic Task Force meeting, and she told me
Excuse
personally...
me, would you like to come with me, sir?
Sure.
Excuse me, we'll be right with you.
And I was then dragged behind closed doors and told that one must make an appointment, that this was not the way things were done, that one must not arrive unannounced. I told the woman that I had called several times with no results.
You're ready. All right, action. We'll put the thing on. Action. Want to shake hands?
Okay, glad to
We'll be
meet
right
you.
with you,
That's right.
okay? Have fun. Why don't you sit down and read our magazine?
I was herded into still another room. A man who said he was an atomic scientist attempted to convince me that the amounts of radioactivity found in my well and in my neighbor's wells was not harmful. I showed him the federal standards and asked him why, if the federal people say the water was dangerous, the state still maintained that it was not harmful. He said that the federal standards were very conservative, implying that the federal people were inaccurate and the state knew better. Children are, without doubt, drinking radioactive water at this time, and the state says we wash our hands of it. I'm concerned because the people across the road in Monroe Township are still not hooked up to municipal water.
Anybody else want tea? Make some hot tea here for you.
Unfortunately, one half of the street is located, the residents are located in South Brunswick, and the other half of the residents across the street are located in Monroe Township. South Brunswick did offer the lineup with respect to Monroe Township picking up part of the bill for the installation of the water line. And I don't think an agreement was reached to have Monroe hook up to the municipal water supply.
Money aside, what about the health of these families?
We've been carting water for 6 years now. Looks like we're going to have a long wait today. Hello. Fine. Everybody's decided to get water at the same time.
Hi, Rita. Hi, Eleanor. How are you?
Fine.
You're here again.
Yeah, we meet at the old water hole.
Water hole.
Okay, we're almost done here.
Yeah.
And then we'll be
We'll
leaving.
have to wait for these people to get through.
Yeah.
Party water.
Yeah, I'm sick of this.
Prior to this happening, I think the DEP almost worked on a crisis intervention type of program. Now they're on a continual monitoring program. I believe the time span is a sample every 6 months.
I have not seen anybody for 1.5 years to 2 years. Now, it seems to me somewhere along the line I should have seen somebody at least once if they came every 6 months. Frank Taylor, who went after, got a hand to that man.
Every time they got knocked down one way or another, he went right back in and they started fighting again.
An area now where all these homes and all these businesses in this area are supplied by well water. Right now we're in Monroe Township heading down toward Jamesburg. The groundwater flows in a direction from my house directly toward Jamesburg. And the pollution is beginning to show up in wells all the way down the line. They're not doing anything to find out when this will hit Jamesburg, when it's going to start affecting hundreds, maybe thousands of people. Incidentally, here's Ayavadia's nursery with the 2 wells that were bad enough to report.
We had a little trouble with the well over here, the spring. He was getting a lot of sand. It's some chemical, something, eat them up. Well, when it get bad, we got to do something. We can't stay like this. We got to drink the water.
If Ayavadia's wells came up bad, that means necessarily that the private wells in the area have to be contaminated too.
Sure, for our health and for our own child. 4 years old. He'll be around a lot longer than we will be.
The lethargic, just sick feeling. We get that a lot. We've talked about that quite a bit. At some of the homeowners meetings, people think, question, could be something in the water.
The last time they came down, they did find metals. I think they found lead and zinc in our water. But it was levels that were small enough that they considered at that time that was acceptable to drink.
Yeah, it has chemicals in it, Daddy. From John's house. We have to drink cream soda.
We just hope it doesn't seep up this way. As far as we know, it hasn't yet.
We've been here for 20 years.
I'll tell you, it makes wonderful tea. If you have water that makes good tea, you've got good water, and our water makes good tea.
People say, well, my water doesn't smell bad, it tastes good to me, and I have to keep reminding these people that Teddy Cordes water, which was proved to have chloroform, trichloroethane, trichloroethylene, had no discernible odor whatsoever, not to me or to anyone else.
And I haven't had any problem. Well, I can't really, make any waves because it's not affected me, see? But if it ever does, then I'm going to have to really do something, especially here. That'll blow this whole business.
They don't want to face it. Why? I have no idea.
I can't believe that they realize what they're doing and could still do it. They're unthinkingly sacrificing the safety of their family, of their children, to protect the value, this mythical thing, of a piece of real estate. We went to all these people and we said, look, we've got a big problem here. They were not interested. Their child perhaps dying from leukemia 15 or 20 years from now, that doesn't count. It's not immediate enough.
No, there is no basis for, quote, warning our population, hey, excuse me, the sky is falling, the sky is falling, because it's just plain not true. We do not have, in general, across the board, a problem with our groundwater.
Oh, you'd be amazed when people from all over come here.
And the water stinks, huh?
Stinky.
That bad?
Horrible. It smells like polluted water. It tastes like polluted water.
So many different chemicals in the water.
Some of the people who live in our hole have bad water.
We've had rashes in the house.
Our scalp has burnt when using the water.
We cannot take baths. We have to take fast showers. And that's taking a chance, too, because the skin absorbs those.
If a contaminating factory don't want to dispose proper way of a poisonous chemical, lets them dump in the president of corporation house, in his backyard. This is what they do to me. Then I would understand that's democracy in American way. In his backyard. Why in my backyard? Because it's my backyard.
But they're telling you, don't dump in my backyard. You know, go somewhere else, okay? And it is hard, extremely hard, to work reasonably with any community in this state at this time when you are coming to the point of resolving a disposal problem.
In Elizabeth, they have a facility that stored thousands upon thousands of barrels of hazardous waste. I heard they were having a public meeting, so I decided to go up. I thought maybe I could tell them some of the problems we run into and maybe suggest ways that they can head some of those problems off.
I'm shaking. I'm very scared. I have to breathe this air every day. I don't know what's going to happen to me at the end of the year from breathing this air. I'd like to know.
I just want to know what your office is doing now.
In what regard, sir? I told you that I would monitor that for air pollution violations. Okay, pick on me. If you feel better doing that,
you got the
fine.
job.
No, sir, I did not.
You got the job. You do your job. There's always
do your job. Absolutely. You're absolutely
and we
right.
wouldn't have to stand here.
How could you sit there and say that there's no health hazard? The radiation alone causes leukemia, causes cancer. Go to Dr. Worcester's office and ask him about the rate of an increase in leukemia from exposure to radiation. And then don't you sit there, don't you dare sit there and tell me that we don't have to worry about anything to get the cancer out of here. I want to know.
Was a toxic time bomb. Last night it went off, exploding into a gigantic fireball, lighting up the sky along the major highways and waterways of New Jersey and Staten Island. The site in Elizabeth, New Jersey. It was
Immediately I thought it must have been the spot that Frank had visited last year. It was unbelievable, I mean, what was happening.
But the cleanup process was moving along at a snail's pace while the time bomb kept ticking.
And authorities say there are at least 2,000 sites throughout the United States, probably more, that fit the same description. They are all chemical time bombs.
You don't pick up the paper any time. I mean, every day you see something pertaining to some nasty pollution.
The fact that 10 million other wells may be polluted in the United States doesn't make me feel any better about our well having been polluted. It really doesn't change anything as far as these kids and this family is concerned.
My legs, my teeth, bones especially, I had 4 separate stress fractures during school and running while I was running.
When we started thinking about the water, that Joan had been drinking this water with this carcinogen in it when she was carrying him, we said, well, you know, maybe that's the reason.
He was born in January of '78 and was diagnosed 13 months later with leukemia.
I mean, they didn't even make an attempt to let people know that this kind of stuff was even stored there and that it had seeped into the water supply. You're so frustrated. There's nothing you can do.
When I went down to testify in Washington, a friend of mine said, why bother? They know everything you're going to tell them anyway. And I said, well, at least this way they'll know what happens to a private American citizen when he runs into a problem like this, the absolute helplessness that the private citizen is subjected to.
Well, we were using and buying spring water, and then the price got so high out in the local supermarkets where we live that, you know, and in the summertime it's very difficult to keep these gallon jugs.
Yeah, now the price of spring water might be high, but the price of cancer surgery is a hell of a lot higher.
But that's why some of my fish died. They
No
get
kill
these
'em.
burns on their body, and they've been dying on me. Having a problem keeping
And you're
them.
drinking the stuff? Wow.
Well, I drink as little water as I possibly get away with. Excuse me. Washington, D.C., next stop.
44 million tons of hazardous waste are produced each year in the United States. The EPA estimates that 90% of it is disposed of improperly.
Our next witness is Mr. Frank Kaler of New Jersey. Perhaps it's largely as a result of your efforts, but my understanding is the state of New Jersey now has a policy whereby there is no landfill operation in the state which is currently eligible to receive industrial or hazardous waste. There are no landfill operations that are accepting hazardous waste. Is that your understanding as well?
Well, I'd really like to know where the hazardous waste is going. It's not just piling up mountain high. Someone's getting rid of it somewhere, and of course that's certainly a
Well,
problem.
that goes to the whole question of illegal dumping.
Fine. I don't believe that the JIS landfill today is authorized to accept hazardous material. But I'll quote a DEP employee just a week and a half or so ago who said, but who is there to watch it?
Fully half of the waste in America are going to end up in places like sanitary landfills after the promulgation of federal regulations. The very waste that we're paying to clean up have been dropped from our regulations. We're not regulating those wastes. So those very same wastes can be disposed of all over again.
We'll be regulating a very, very substantial proportion of the hazardous waste once our regulations are promulgated in April. And over time, as we learn more about the problem, as we get more information, we will be expanding, refining, tightening, sharpening, and perfecting that regulatory structure.
What about the people who will be affected in the meantime?
In my opinion, EPA and the administration do not want to regulate industrial disposal of hazardous waste. People started being told to change the regulations, and these changes were being made on political grounds. In some cases, the scientific data that they provided was removed by their superiors because they didn't feel it adequately supported the political decisions that had been made. Unless this lack of will and attitude is changed, any money or positions added to EPA's budget for hazardous waste management is wasted.
This hazardous waste issue is a test, a major test of this country and the government of this country as to whether the people are stronger than the large corporations and can get the government to protect them instead of the corporations.
My name is Frank Kaler. I live in South Brunswick, Middlesex County, New Jersey. I'd like to thank this committee for having given me the opportunity to testify here today about the problems I've had in a case involving the pollution of the aquifer. My well became polluted as a result of uncontained leachate from an adjacent landfill, which was licensed by the state of New Jersey and regulated by the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. The township, county, and state all told me that there was nothing wrong with my water, but one sniff of the samples, which I have provided for you, will, I am sure, convince you that I was justified in my complete lack of confidence in official competence or sincerity. One finds that industry, through the landfill, with the explicit permission of government, polluted my well. And under the present system, which is heavily loaded in favor of industrial interests, as opposed to private citizens individually or in groups, I was almost totally legally impotent. I am forced to the conclusion that there was no equity in our courtroom because I did not have enough money to pay for it. For under the present system, equity is a very high-priced commodity. There appears to be an unspoken but clearly understood law that the public shall be allowed a good enough environmental quality to survive and produce without being driven to the wall of rebellion.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Senator Muskie?
I appreciate that statement very much. I want to commend you for your persistence. It isn't easy as an individual citizen to come down here at your own expense and speak your piece. You've spoken it, and you've spoken it well. I compliment you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kaler. We're grateful to you for your appearance here today and your testimony.
Sir, have we done any good down there?
Yes, you have.
Do
You
you
have
think
definitely
we've
done some good.
gotten
We
the message
appreciate your
through?
coming down, and let us just feel our way through this thing. It'll take us a little while. See what we can do.
Well, we have to do something.
Okay, fine.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate you coming down.
Don't close the door on us like that.
It's odd, Ted. For instance, if a man came into my yard and he had a gun and he attempted to harm or kill my children, I could shoot him. I could kill him on the spot and it would be perfectly legal. But if a man lets poison trespass on my property, which can have the same, in a more horrible way, the same effect, there doesn't appear to be a damn thing I can do about it. I went down to Washington, and I talked to men who appeared to be sensible. Senator Muskie, Senator Culver, Senator Chaffee, and they sit up there very respectfully and listen to me. But they're caught between the rock of what's really going on and the hard place of industrial lobbyists and industrial pressures. I raised my kids. I used to take them down to Jamesburg to see the parades when they were small, and I told the boys, take your hat off, stand at attention, this is your flag, this is your country. I believed in that there was justice in the United States. I argued it with Teddy when we first got into this. He felt no. I was more naive than he at the time. And today I teach my children that you can buy your share of American justice if you have enough money to pay for it and no other way. That the laws are made by the rich and the powerful to protect the rich and the powerful. And the richest and most powerful in this country today are the industrialists, large industries. They run this country, in my estimation.
If anybody wants more coffee, the water is hot.
Frank Kaler's story has many postscripts, but no ending. The dump site next to Kaler's house was closed by court order in 1980, but contaminants from it are still seeping into the groundwater. Frank Kaler is still using municipal water, which he distills and filters. Teddy Cordes has scaled down his nursery. And statewide, New Jersey, within the past year, found out it has to date the most toxic waste sites of any state, 65. They are on EPA's priority list called the Superfund. The one next to Frank Kaler's property is one of them, but not his, nor any one of the 65 has been cleaned up so far. Nationally, the Environmental Protection Agency's new administrator, William Ruckelshaus, has called the problem of toxic waste sites, quote, truly staggering, and he has promised to act. But a recent congressional study underscores what he faces. The study reports close to 300 million tons of toxic wastes are generated yearly. That is over a ton for every person, 6 times the amount EPA has estimated. The current approach to the problem, putting it in secured landfills, will prove, quote, ineffective because landfills eventually leak. And lastly, to deal with all of this, the EPA, according to this study, is short of manpower, money, and a regulatory system that works. Next week, on Frontline, the images, words, and emotions of the Vietnam veterans' homecoming, 10 years overdue. They held a parade to honor themselves. They held vigils to remember. But they came here, to a wall, to find signs that America was ready to stop blaming a war on those who were sent to fight it. Next week, on Frontline, the program is called Vietnam Memorial. I'm Jessica Savage.
For a transcript of this program, please send $4 to Frontline, Box 322, Boston, Massachusetts, 02134. Frontline is produced for the Documentary Consortium by WGBH Boston, which is solely responsible for its content. Major funding for Frontline was provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Additional funding was provided by this station and other public television stations nationwide, and by the Chubb Group of Insurance Companies, for over 100 years providing worldwide business and personal insurance through independent agents and brokers.
For video cassette information about Frontline, write to PBS Video, Box 8092, Washington, D.C., 20024.